joining us today. We often have special guest speakers, and this week our special guest speaker is our very own Rukmini. Not so much a guest speaker, I guess. And just briefly, because I think we all know our dear Rukmini. She's an activist in women's spiritual empowerment and interfaith dialogue, and she's the founder of this collective. She's also a member of the board of directors of the Bhakti Center, and a member of something called SABA, Third Person International Committee that advises the GBC of ISKCON. And she's been traversing the path of bhakti most of her life, living in India, in Canada, and the US, and is one of the first disciples of Srila Prabhupada, who brought bhakti to the West in 1965. She's featured in the film Women of Bhakti. She writes, teaches, and leads workshops and retreats internationally. And she does a lot of retreats, etc., including our own Urban Devi retreat. Today, our focus it's a week before Gaur Panim. And so her conversation this week is on the mercy of Lord Caitanya, since his appearance day is March 28th. And she'll talk about how his mercy impacts and changes our lives and the trajectory of our future. So without further ado, I will turn everything over to our dear Rukmini. Again, thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you all for your patience. Thank you for joining us, and please excuse our technical glitch. Welcome. I'll say a few prayers of invocation. Om Mahagyanatimarandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chaksun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manabhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamaiham Dadati Sapadantikam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamini Namane Namaste Saraswate Deve Kauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Dushitarine Mukham Karoti Vachalam Pangolam Dhayate Girim Yat Kripas Tamaham Bande Shri Gunam Dinatarinam Panchakapatarubhyascha Kripasindhu Bhaivacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Thank you all so much for joining us today at Urban Devi. I wanted to not neglect to welcome also Brajarani, who just introduced me. She's also just joined the board of directors of Bhakti Center. So I wanted to say Haribo and welcome to our wonderful Brajarani. She, her qualifications are so extraordinary that she got kicked upstairs. So thank you, Brajarani. Thanks for the introduction. Thanks all of you for joining us. So I wanted to begin with a little blessing for all of you. This is from Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Lila, 2nd chapter, 2nd verse. Here is the verse. It says, maybe I'll put my tambura back on while I read this. Yeah, make it a little lower. Oh, my merciful Lord Chaitanya, may the nectarian Ganges waters of your transcendental activities flow on the surface of my desert-like tongue. Beautifying these waters are the lotus flowers of singing, dancing, and loud chanting of Krishna's holy name, which are the pleasure abodes of unalloyed devotees. These devotees are compared to swans, ducks, and bees. The rivers flowing produces a melodious sound that gladdens their ears. Do you like that prayer? I like it. Good. I hope you all like it. Good. So in this prayer, this is Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami speaking, and he's talking about these beautiful pastimes of Lord Chaitanya that he's about to start to beautifully unpack in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. He's saying that they're like a river, and that this river is a pleasure abode for all the loving devotees who love to sing and dance, and swans and bees and ducks, creatures that go to sweet and nectarian places. So there's a tension here, right? He's talking about his desert-like, parched desert-like tongue and, dry topics that we tend to engage in, right? Compared to the flowing river of nectarian pastimes of Krishna or of Lord Chaitanya. So I was thinking about this tension. I was thinking about how we do find some sweetness in this world. We do, but it's mixed, It's not what we'd hope for, or even if it's what we hope for, it still has to end. Just like in a desert. Actually, the great poet Vidyapati said that in a desert, just a few drops of water are not sufficient. But great reservoirs of water, great oases of water are needed to quench the thirst in the desert. So, I was thinking that even in worldly exchanges, when we can somehow connect through remembrance or some kind of connection with Krishna, I think probably I experience, maybe you experience also, that we can perceive some sweetness seeping in when we're able to connect the things of this world to Krishna somehow, like something simple like drinking water. If we can remember that Krishna is the taste of this water, or even chant the verse from the Gita, 7th chapter, 8th verse, Rasoham apsokanteya, that you are the taste of this water, that somehow there's even more sweetness to that water when we have connected to remembrance. I don't know if you've heard this before, but once Srila Prabhupada said that even a drunkard, if a drunkard could remember while he's drinking his wine that Krishna is the taste of that wine, that even a drunkard like that could become Krishna conscious by that remembrance. So what a wild thing to say, right? So we have all taken to this path of bhakti, looking for some mercy from Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And I would say we're beginning to taste some of this sweetness, but we have to be patient, and it comes like drops of water wearing away stone, right? Sometimes it's not even perceivable or perceptible, but it comes gradually. I was also thinking that externally we're women, and sometimes that means we're more emotional. The word bhava, have you heard this word bhava? It means our emotional state, either material or spiritual. So as women, even externally, often we can be more emotional. Often we're not so interested in dry philosophical speculation. We want to know I mean, maybe I'm speaking too generally, but we want to know, I think our tendency is we want to know where to place our love. And Lord Chaitanya teaches us how to aspire for that kind of pure, selfless love, and what to cry for. He was always crying for Krishna, right? So as women, I would say, even externally, we try to love so many things, and often we cry for so many things, right? But Lord Chaitanya teaches us how to love, how to long for Krishna, and how to cry in longing for Krishna. So we have our emotions, we have our bhava. Where should we place our bhava? Where should we place our emotions? So yesterday I was listening to this lecture by Srila Prabhupada, and he was talking about how, it was so interesting, he was talking about how as living beings, we have to change our bhava, from our emotions, from material bhava to spiritual bhava. So it's not a question of negating emotions. It's a question of where to place that bhava, how to redirect that bhava, how to redirect our emotions to topics of spirit, to really to the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, right? And what's so interesting is love is always free, right? Love can never be forced. So it's always our freedom. Whether we're men or women, where do we place our bhava? Where do we place our aspirations? And I also wanted to say that this is not just about modernity. This is not just about women in the modern age having the freedom to choose to place our bhava in the spiritual realm, but this is even described in the earliest Upanishad. The Brihan Aranyaka Upanishad describes that the sage Yajnavalkya had two wives at that time. You know, two wives was okay and all legal and everything, right? But his one wife was called, her name was Maitreyi, and she was known as a Brahmavadini. She was a philosopher of Brahman. She gave discourses and on the Vedas. And his other wife, her name was Katyayani, and she was known as Stri Pragya. She was more interested in womanly things or worldly things. So no matter who we are, no matter when we appear in this world, even in ancient times, it's a question of where do we wish to place our focus or our aspirations. So I'd say, you know, most of us, I can speak for myself, most of us, we're a mix of both, right? But step by step, we try to progress to this pole star, I would say, pole star of aspirations, to aspire to the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, to aspire to realize who we are beyond this world, beyond this material realm, beyond this identity as an American, as a woman, as someone of such and such age, such and such race or gender or whatever we are, right? So Bhaktivinoda Thakur said something really, really beautiful that I love. So he is Prabhupada's guru's father. He's considered the pioneer of sending Krishna consciousness off into the Western worlds. So he said something really beautiful, that as we look off into the future of our lives, we should see the material and spiritual sides of our lives coming together at the horizon, at the future of our lives, just like railroad tracks would come together at the horizon. So I find that really, really beautiful. So in other words, we love our lives, we love our families, we have so many interests in this world, but the path of bhakti is seeking to help us focus that ultimate goal on this spiritual ultimate goal of life. So yeah, Krishna appears in this age of Kali, covered in the golden complexion of Sri Radha. He's not blackish like Krishna, although he's Krishna himself. And the Srimad Bhagavatam says that those who are intelligent, sumedasa, Those who are intelligent in the age of Kali will worship this beautiful Lord Caitanya by chanting his holy name. I wanted to share with you something really beautiful. This is something that was written in the 18th century. One day, Krishna sat beside Radhika in the forest of Vrindavan. Taking one of her hands in his, he pleaded, "Please give me something special today." And inwardly, Radha's heart melted at his request, but outwardly, she gave him her little sidelong glance. She looked at him sideways, and she concealed her secret mind with a steadied silence. So she didn't have any words of reply, but she just tilted her head a little bit, and with a sidelong glance and the sign language of her lotus hand, she invited Krishna to tell her what he wanted. And then Krishna eagerly obliged her silent invitation. And he said, "Please give me your love, give me your love." So Radha smiled, and then she playfully said, "But Krishna, this love of mine would be too heavy for you to bear. You couldn't bear it." And then her saucy girlfriend, her best friend Lalita, came along and said, "Radha's love would be too heavy for you, Krishna. You should know how intense it is. When you are not nearby, her anxiety knows no limit." So even though we try our best, no remedy can be found to comfort her distress. We anoint her body that's blazing from the fire of separation with cooling sandalwood paste, but the sandalwood flies from her limbs like dry leaves of paper. We beg her to lie down on a shaded bed. We prepare for her strewn with dampened lotus flowers, but the fragrant petals are incinerated by the fever of her longing. So it is true that no one but the Queen of Vraja could bear this weight. It would be too heavy for you, Krishna. So hearing these words, Krishna grabbed hold of Radharani's other hand, and with tears coming from his lotus eyes, he begged her one more time. He says, "I cannot live without tasting the nectar of your love." So Radharani was astonished by joy, and she broadly smiled, and then, or as if orchestrated by her heartbeat, all of Vrindavan fell silent, eavesdropping to hear what she would say. So Radharani then said, she said, "All right, beloved, I will give you this love you crave, but there's something more. You will need the sanctuary of my golden complexion to shield your beautiful blackish body, because the intensity of my love will cause you to stumble and fall." So then she said, "Without the protection of my golden effulgence, you will be bruised. This golden hue will indemnify you instantly. No harm will come to overtake your soft body, which is more dear to me than life itself." So then Krishna was concealed by the molten gold of Sri Radha's dazzling complexion, which caused him to adopt her mood and her inner disposition. Then what happened? His limbs began to tremble and dance in jubilation, and he began to cry out just as Radha does, "Oh, Krishna, where are you? Where are you? Oh, ascendant moon risen from the dynasty of Nanda Maharaj and Yashoda. Oh, beloved of my life breath, where are you?" And then as soon as Krishna possessed and was possessed by this love, his amorous cries transformed the landscape. The stones that were within earshot melted in ecstasy. The trees began to dance, and the ardor of the love he felt caused him to crash down like a tree torn from the earth by a gale and cast to the ground. And so it was that Sri Radha's beautiful golden effulgence protected him as she had promised. This is the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu exhibiting Sri Radha's mood in loving Sri Krishna, the greatest love covered by the complexion and mood of Sri Radha. So this is from Narahari Chakravarti, from the Narottam Vilas, written in the 18th century. So, did you like that? It's beautiful, right? So yeah, so we have to look beyond this world, right, to perceive that we're meant for a much higher life, and to be able to try to change our bhava from this material bhava to a spiritual bhava. So I love this in the path of bhakti, that, you know, it's not about negating our emotions, everybody. It's about transforming them from material to spiritual, right? Yeah, so then I was thinking of, where's another place where Krishna uses this word bhava? And in this verse in the Bhagavad Gita, 10th chapter, this is one of the nutshell verses of Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 10, 8 through 11. These 4 verses, if you want to look them up, those are called the nutshell verses of Bhagavad Gita. And in this first one, Krishna uses this term Buddha Bhava Samanvita. He says that I am the source of all material and spiritual worlds. Everything emanates from me. The wise who know this perfectly engage in my devotional service with all their hearts. So this phrase, Buddha, you know what, everyone knows Buddha, right? According to the Vedic understanding, it means intelligent, one who's intelligent. Buddha was the most intelligent person, right? He rejected the external practices of the materialistic Brahmins who were misusing the Vedas just in order to eat meat. So he said, throw away the Vedas, ahimsa paramo dharma, be kind to the animals. So he's called Buddha, very intelligent. So in this verse of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna uses this word, Buddha Bhava Samanvita, that those with spiritual intelligence worship me with all their hearts, Krishna says. So yeah, we have to evolve our bhava from material to spiritual. And in the pastimes of Lord Caitanya, well, this is Urban Devi, so I thought we should talk about some of the women in the pastimes of Lord Caitanya, right? So first of all, at the very beginning, at the core, at the essence of the pastimes of Lord Caitanya, beginning with his mother Sachi, talks about, one of the first verses of Chaitanya Charitamrita talks about Lord Caitanya appearing. This is a beautiful phrase. He appeared from the ocean of the womb of Srimati Sachi Devi. How beautiful is that? And then one of the other verses in the beginning of the CC. This is actually, this Sanga is actually an advertisement. Please read the CC. The beginning, the Adi Lila, can be very scholarly, because Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami is explaining the truth, or what's called the tattva of Lord Chaitanya. So it can be a little laborious to get through that tattva, but then the nectar begins to flow after understanding that foundation. So please, you know, read Chaitanya Charitamrita. Actually, one other thing I should say here is that in the time of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, which was in the maybe 1870s, he was in Bengal, he couldn't find a single copy in all of Bengal, Lord Chaitanya's birthplace. He couldn't find a single copy of Chaitanya Charitamrita, and he searched everywhere. So how fortunate we are. You know, finally, in Orissa, he found a copy of it and made many copies. But there were people with ulterior motives who were trying to block the mercy of Lord Chaitanya and his teachings that Krishna consciousness, that the path of bhakti is everyone should be eligible, people from all countries, people from all races, from all genders. So there were designing people trying to block this mercy. And that's why the Chaitanya Charitamrita was unavailable at that time. So look at us now. We can just open up a book from our shelf, or we can just go on the internet and read the Chaitanya Charitamrita. How fortunate we are by the grace of Kali Yuga. But let's take advantage of it, right? So here's another verse from the beginning of Chaitanya Charitamrita. It says, Brajarani, can you tell me what time I'm supposed to stop?
Well, we go till 3:30. So if you want to stop at 3 and we can field questions, that would be good.
Okay. Here's another verse from the Chaitanya Charitamrita. This one's also beautiful. It also mentions Lord Chaitanya's mother. May that Lord, who is known as the son of Srimati Sachi Devi, be transcendentally situated within the innermost chambers of your heart. Resplendent with the radiance of molten gold, he has appeared in the age of Kali by his causeless mercy to bestow what no incarnation has ever offered before, the most sublime and radiant mellow of devotional service, the mellow of conjugal love. So then once again, his identity is confirmed as the combined form of Radha and Krishna. And that's described in the next verse. Let me read that one. The loving affairs of Sri Radha and Krishna are transcendental manifestations of the Lord's internal pleasure-giving potency. Although Radha and Krishna are one in their identity, they've separated themselves eternally. Now these two transcendental identities have again united in the form of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. I bow down to him who has manifested himself with the sentiment and complexion of Srimati Radharani, although he is Krishna himself. So it's beautiful. Radha and Krishna are like two flowers growing from the same stem. Or Gauravani used to like to quote me when I would say that they're like two halves of a chickpea. You know how a chickpea is one? A garbanzo bean in Spanish? It's one, but can pop in half. So they're one, but then in order to enjoy pleasure pastimes, they divide into two, and then they come together again as Lord Chaitanya Krishna trying to understand the love of Radharani. Welcome, Pat. Good to see you. Okay, so then after Lord Chaitanya's appearance, when he's a tiny baby, the very esteemed wife of Advaita Acharya, the great Sita Thakurani, came to see him. And she, because of her pure devotion and deep realization, she recognized his divinity. And except for his golden color, she could see that he's exactly the same as Krishna, the son of Nanda Maharaj. Then in his householder life, after the death of his first wife, Lakshmi Priya, who it said that she died of snake bite when Lord Chaitanya was away in East Bengal for a long time. But really it said that she died of the snake bite of separation. So she died of the snake bite of separation. And then Lord Chaitanya married again. He married Vishnu Priya. And after his sannyas, she cared for his elderly mother, Sachi Devi, and together they bore his separation for their entire lives. So you might ask, and yesterday I was on a call with Andrea and some ladies from Latin America, and someone actually did ask, how could he be so cruel to leave his young wife and his elderly mother and take sannyas like that? So that's something that we ponder a lot, right? And I was thinking of last month when we had our Urban Devi Sanga. If any of you were present, Manjuwali spoke so beautifully. And she said something really profound that I've written in my book. She said that the underbelly of suffering is grace. And wow, I was thinking that really speaks a lot about this mood of separation. It's not really understandable for us right now on our level of advancement. It's so beyond us. But it's said that Krishna is not different from his separation. And what happens is when the devotees long for him, in their feelings of separation, he becomes even more acutely present. So in that way, that grace becomes manifest through their longing of separation. The underbelly of suffering is grace. This is spiritual mood of separation, right? So yeah, he becomes even more present. And when he appears to leave, he actually just goes deeper into their hearts. He actually becomes a prisoner in the hearts of such elevated devotees. And then Lord Caitanya himself was always tasting, always experiencing, teaching this mood of love and separation. In other words, like, think about it. It's so much more shallow to say, I got you, babe, right? Because maybe I don't got you, right? But it's so much deeper to say, where is Krishna? Oh, my Krishna, where are you? Like the Goswamis of Vrindavan were always in this mood of longing. Even though they had Krishna, even though Krishna was a prisoner in their hearts, they were saying, oh, Krishna, where are you? Oh, Radha, where are you? Like that, in that kind of mood. So here's some words of Lord Caitanya himself in speaking in his mood of separation. He says, if by chance the transcendental form of Krishna comes before the path of my vision, my heart, injured from being beaten, by separation, right, will be stolen away by Cupid, happiness personified. Because I could not see the beautiful form of Krishna to my heart's content, when I again see his form, I shall decorate the phases of time with many jewels. Then he says, if by chance such a moment comes when I can once again see Krishna, then I shall worship those seconds, moments, and hours with flower garlands and pulp of sandalwood and decorate them with all kinds of jewels and ornaments. Isn't that beautiful? Isn't that such a beautiful prayer? Decorating the phases of time with jewels, if that time should ever come to him when he could see Krishna again. Of course, by that longing, he's seeing Krishna, right? That's the point. So this is so much beyond our understanding. And yet we can also worship this mood and aspire for this mood of separation. But actually, Lord Caitanya said in one place in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, he said that he's eternally present in 4 places. He said he's eternally present in the home of Sachi Mata, his mother, whenever she's cooking. So what does that mean? He never really did leave, right? Wherever Lord Nityananda is dancing, he's eternally present there. In the kirtan, in the home of Srivas Pandit, and in the home of Raghava Pandit, who was also cooking for him in so much love. So if you cook for Krishna with lots of love, he will come and be present in your house too. But the mood has to be, Krishna, I have nothing. I'm powerless. Please accept this offering. What is my value? What is the value of anything I can offer you? But please accept it. So this is how to attract Krishna to come and eat our cooking and to come and live in our house, right? Yeah, so after taking sannyas, Lord Caitanya, he was a very exemplary sannyasi, and he was very careful and very strict in his dealings with women. And, you know, we've seen these days in the, the Me Too movement, we've seen so many scandals, right? So many yogis have sexually abused women disciples. But Srila Prabhupada was very, very strict. Sometimes we don't understand why he was so strict, but in retrospect, we can see, wow, practically every one of these yogis and gurus has had some fall down of, affairs and this kind of thing. So Lord Caitanya also, even in his householder days, he never joked. It said that he never joked with any woman except his wife and of course his mother. But after his sannyas, there are some very interesting incidents that took place with Lord Caitanya and women in his pastimes. once he was standing in his usual place at the back in the Jagannath temple. He didn't go too close to Lord Jagannath because the first time he came to see Lord Jagannath, he was overwhelmed with ecstasy and went into a big faint that lasted for several days, right? So he would always stay at the back and he would hold on to this Garuda Stamba. If you go to Puri, you can see the Garuda Stamba, and actually his footprints are melted into the stone of the floor. You can see that yourself with your own eyes. So he would stay back, but he was so tall, he was almost 7 feet tall. And once this very simple Bengali widow, little lady, you know, in general, Bengali people are not that tall. So here's this little Bengali widow lady. She climbed up onto the shoulders of Lord Caitanya so she could see Lord Jagannath. And the Lord Chaitanya's servant Govinda was so horrified, and he's trying to, Lord Chaitanya's in ecstasy too, right? And so Govinda's trying to tell him, my Lord, there's a lady standing on your shoulder. And so then, but he didn't really notice, he was in so much ecstasy. And Govinda's trying to tell him and trying to get this lady to come down. You can just, what a great play it would be, wouldn't it? You know? So even though he's so strict, afterwards, Lord Chaitanya told Govinda, he said, if she wants to see the Lord, if that's what she wanted, then she could climb on my head. That would be all right with me. So the point I'm trying to make here is that Lord Chaitanya was so inspired by her ecstatic devotion and her eagerness to see the Lord, right? That he said she could stand on his head if she wanted. So there's another story about his very strict behavior with his sannyas disciples, one of his sannyas disciples. There was a young sannyasi who was begging rice at the home of a great Vaishnavi whose name was Madhavi Mahiti. She was very elderly at the time, and she was a very, very great devotee. Lord Chaitanya wasn't there when this happened, but he could understand by his transcendental vision that what happened was Lord Chaitanya could detect that while he was begging rice, this young sannyasi had looked lustfully at this elderly pure Vaishnavi. And what happened was Lord Chaitanya actually banned him from his association. Lord Chaitanya banned him from his association. But just to show that the essence of pure devotion is the real thing, and beyond all external considerations, Lord Chaitanya, during his final days in Puri, he was cloistered in his room called the Gambira, and he was exhibiting the mood of Sri Radha crying in separation from Krishna. And one of his most intimate associates at that time was this very great devotee, Madhavi Mahiti, as well as her brother Sikhi Mahiti. So Lord Chaitanya at that time is Krishna in the mood and complexion of Radharani. And then Swarup Damodar, his other most intimate associate, was Lalita, the one I mentioned before, the saucy friend of Radharani. That was Swarup Damodar in Lord Chaitanya's pastimes. And then his other intimate associate, Ramananda Roy, in Krishna Lila, she had been Vishaka, Radharani's other dearmost friend in the Vrindavan Lila. So whenever you see Krishna, like if you go to Mayapur, if you see Radha and Krishna, Krishna's playing his flute, Radharani's next to him, then on Krishna's side is Lalita, who became Swarup Damodar in Lord Chaitanya's pastimes. On Radharani's side is Vishaka, who became Ramananda Roy, right? But then the other two associates were this Madhavi Mahiti and her brother Sikhi Mahiti. So in those final intimate pastimes behind closed doors, these were the intimate associates of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But in the rigid society at that time, because one of them was a woman, they were considered to only be 3.5. So why is that? I don't really know the answer to that, because it has to do with that that very rigid culture at that time. But it's interesting that Lord Caitanya so often seemed ready to just turn that culture on its head in so many ways. For example, he named the so-called untouchable Haridas Thakur, who came from a Muslim family. He named him as the great teacher of the holy name, and he danced with his body. So here he's so-called untouchable to these caste Brahmins, to these materialistic Brahmins. But Lord Chaitanya is dancing with his body, his dead body after he passed away. Lord Chaitanya is dancing with the body of Haridas Thakur, right? And other situations also, like embracing Rupa and Sanatan Goswamis, who he made them Goswamis. They had been ostracized from the Brahminical culture. But sometimes Lord Chaitanya did not disturb the external cultural mores of the time. For example, he didn't protest when Haridas Thakur and Rupa and Sanatan were not allowed in the Jagannath temple. So, but it's interesting that 500 years later, when Srila Prabhupada went to Puri, he did protest and he did object that his Western disciples were not allowed to have darshan in the Jagannath temple. And when he lectured there, the king was present, all the leaders of the society, the big Brahmins, and Srila Prabhupada told them all very boldly. He told them all, he is Jagannath. He is the Lord of the universe. He's not called Purinath. He's not just the Lord of this little city of Puri. He is Lord of the whole world. He belongs to the whole world. So the real point I'm making here is that pure devotion can never be minimized or calculated or measured or put in a box. And the pure devotion of these great associates of Lord Chaitanya is infinite. And the devotion of Haridas Thakur or Madhavi Mahiti is beyond sectarian considerations. And you know, when you think about it, what is 1/2 of infinity, right? Their devotion is infinite. So what is 1/2 of infinity? So just like these great devotees, both men and women, as I said earlier, we can try to shift our own bhava, our emotions, from the material to the spiritual. And in that way, we can also try to be deeply moved and transformed by these moods of separation, this pure love of Krishna, both in union and in separation. And that's really the reality of love, the reality of spiritual emotion beyond the temporary fluctuations that we get in the material bhavas, right, of the mind, the senses, the material emotions. So these are some thoughts of mine on the mercy of Lord Chaitanya. I just wanted to close with another prayer that I find really beautiful. This one is from a really, really beautiful book. If you can find it online or find it in hard copy, it's called Chaitanya Chandramrita. It's a little bitty book, but it's an ecstatic book. Here's one prayer from that ecstatic book. It's by Prabodhananda Saraswati. Just looking for it to show you the cover. But anyway, it's printed in many, many different formats. But here's a beautiful prayer from that wonderful book. He says, "O Lord Chaitanya, O merciful one, O supremely generous one, O Lord who fills the hearts of the living entities with the different mellows of devotional love. O wonderfully splendid Lord, O golden complexioned Lord, O ocean of transcendental virtues, O personified nectar of devotional service, O Lord, who is fond of chanting his own holy names, I pray that without ever becoming fatigued, may I pass my life always in chanting your holy names." So I hope you like this prayer. This is Chaitanya Chandramrita, 7th chapter, 67th verse, if you want to look it up. So thank you all so much for joining us here at Urban Devi. And please tell me, what was important for you here? Do you have any reflections, any takeaways, anything you want to share with somebody else? Or do you have any questions?
Hare
So
Krishna.
Vrajrani, are you going to try to field these questions
I will
from?
try to field these questions.
Okay.
Yes. So you can put your questions here in the chat if you'd like, just to try to field them. And thank you so much, Rukmini. I feel like I moved out of some more material bhav into a spiritual bhav just by like listening to you speak about Lord Chaitanya and his pastimes. I mean, I could feel
Oh.
myself just kind of floating in this nectarian ocean. So just thank
Oh,
you so much.
thank you so much. While we're waiting for other questions or thoughts or feedback, is Hemalata Thakurani, is she here, still here? I see some phone numbers without names.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know if she's
I
here.
don't know. I had a couple of other things. And Hemalata,
Okay.
if you're around, you can raise your hand. I don't see her name here, and it had shown up before.
Okay.
The other thing is I could also imagine, I've been thinking about like how to pray and what to pray for. And one of my newest prayers, I think, is going to be able to see these two tracks of the train sort of meet on the
Oh,
horizon in the future, this material and the spiritual sort of coming together, which is
beautiful.
feels like yeah,
Very profound.
yeah. And I know that I also that I've heard this story before about that when I think Srila Prabhupada said that even when someone who's drunk drinks alcohol, if they think of Krishna at that time, that it could be that is sort of bringing Krishna into that moment, right? Thinking that this liquor is the taste of. The question in my mind is how do we remember to do that constantly? How do we bring
That's a
that?
great question. Thank you. And we have to, it's said that in chanting in the path of bhakti, we have to be in a receiving mood more than an achieving mood. And this is a big question because, we try and we try and we grit our teeth and we try. But, it's about receiving that grace, right? And Krishna says, one thing I've been thinking about lately is when I'm chanting, I've been praying to Krishna that, my mind is flying all over the universe here. But you say in the Gita that you're the source of remembrance and you're the source of knowledge and you're the source of forgetfulness. So please help me remember and give me knowledge of how to remember and let me be present here with this chanting and in your holy name and in your remembrance. So I think it comes as a gift, but I always like to say Krishna's just sitting in our hearts unemployed if we don't turn to him, if we don't ask him to guide us, right? Because we've asked him for so much guidance in the past in so many different lives in so many different forms and so many different directions, up, down, and all around. So now that we've come to the path of bhakti, we can also beg him for that remembrance, for that knowledge, that this is what I want, my dear Krishna, that I may have expressed to you so many, many things, but this is what I really want. This is what I want. I want to remember you. I want the knowledge of how to approach you, how to come to you. Give me the understanding how to come to you. Yeah. And I was thinking, boy, in New York, Brooklyn, you could just be walking by a drunk right on the street and you could say, hey, remember God while you're drinking your wine. We call him Krishna on the path of bhakti. We call him Krishna. Remember him while you're drinking your wine. He's a sweet taste. We could do that. Even in Washington, D.C., I could find people like that lying on the street. So, hey, why not share? Peter Burwash, we have this friend, Peter Burwash, he used to come and he came and spoke at the Bhakti Center once. And he used to come and speak at New Vrindavan every year. And he's dying right now. He has Parkinson's and he's in his last days. But he used to always say that he was a big international tennis pro. He had like an international coterie of tennis clinics in big places all over the world. And he always tells us that he would always like to preach to people when they were drunk because their hearts were more open. And he could just say anything when at these cocktail parties that he would be invited to. He could just say anything. You know, you're not really this material body. Really, you're a spiritual being. You know, why don't you chant God's holy name? And people would just like, because they were so drunk, they could receive it a little bit more. So it's not, this is not advocating becoming a drunkard or taking up something that you might have had in the past, but just a thought on outreach. Yes, sorry, I'm talking so much.
Oh, please, please. I'm sure that everyone is really appreciating your everything that you say. Andrea asked the question about how we hear that Chaitanya Charitamrita is the PhD level compared to the Srimad Bhagavatam and the Gita. So how do we read it? How do we read the CC? I think you and I had this conversation too. How do we read the CC before we've read the Srimad Bhagavatam?
This is really important to understand because some devotees think that I should never touch the CC. Some people think they should never touch even the Krishna book. But because Prabhupada has given it in such, he uses the word prophylactic, in such therapeutic ways, you can just taste all the sides of sweetness at the same time. Srimad Bhagavatam, it's recommended to read from the beginning, the lotus feet of Krishna, or the beginning cantos of Srimad Bhagavatam. But then again, Prabhupada gave the Krishna book in ways that we wouldn't misunderstand. I have a good friend, and she never read the Krishna book to her kids because she thought you're not supposed to go to Krishna's Vrindavan pastimes. And so I was saying to her, what? Your kids need the pastimes of Krishna. So because of the way that Prabhupada has given it in such a way that we won't misunderstand, yes, they can all be read simultaneously. You can read Krishna book. If you're reading through the Bhagavatam, which I recommend and is highly recommended, begin from the first canto and go canto by canto, step by step, but also read the Krishna book and also read the Chaitanya Charitamrita, because these things are precious and life is very short and it's meant to be tasted and meant to be shared. This is Krishna consciousness, actually. It's not just for sharing, which is wonderful, but it's for tasting and sharing. So we should always be aware of that. Some devotees are all about preach, 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 but it has to be tasted in order to be shared. So both have to happen. Or some people are just into tasting and not sharing. That's another way to fall off the razor blade on the other side, right? So it's meant to be tasted and shared. I noticed that Lavanya had a question, or Brajarani, are you?
Yeah, I'm keeping track of them.
Okay.
Sadhana had a question,
Okay.
which was about you quoted something from, I think it was Narottam Vilas or something like that at the beginning. Can you tell us what you quoted from and who wrote it?
Okay, this beautiful piece that I quoted is from Narahari Chakravarti. There's a Narahari Sarkar who was one of the personal associates of Lord Caitanya. But there was another Narahari from the 18th century. His name was Narahari Chakravarti. And he wrote something called the Narottam Vilas. So maybe I should put it, it's long. Where can I share it?
You can share it. We can share it in the, if you want to give it to me later, we can put it into the WhatsApp group, because everyone here is in the WhatsApp group. Otherwise they wouldn't know, they wouldn't have this link. So we can put it there too.
It's so long. How about if anyone wants it, they could, let's see, I can email it to you, Brajarani?
That's fine, perfectly.
Okay.
Yep,
Okay.
and then I'll share it with everyone in the WhatsApp group.
Okay, because you're a collector of nectar. So you think it could actually go in the WhatsApp group, something so long? Or send your email to, if you want, put your email.
I'll figure it out. Send it to me, I'll figure it out. Okay?
Okay, good.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Sadhana.
Yeah. So
And
Lavanda,
Sadhana.
you had a question, but you didn't put it in the box. So I'll unmute you so you can ask your question, okay? Or allow you to unmute yourself. Oh, is that working?
Okay, can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Yes.
Okay, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Lavanya. Good to
So
see
nice
you.
to have your association again.
Good to see you.
I wasn't sure how to type this, but when you brought up that you were talking with some women in Latin America and they were asking how Lord Chaitanya could be so cruel to leave his wife, and it made me think that often when the Lord enacts his pastimes, he's doing more than one thing at a time. Like, for example, you mentioned that in that separation, the devotees are drawing the Lord more deeply into their hearts. And in the material world, it's hard for us to understand because when we're separated, it's a cause of great lamentation and anxiety. But in the spiritual world, that lamentation is actually ecstasy. And at the same time, in taking sannyas, he was giving an opportunity for the Mayavadi sannyasis to make advancement because people weren't respecting him so much as a grihasta. So in some way, he was increasing the ecstasy of the devotion that his wife had for him, and at the same time, he was liberating the Mayavadis at the same time. So I just had that thought when you brought that up of how more than one thing is going on at the same time here.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yeah, you know, he Krishna said that Krishna performs many different miraculous acts by one action that he performs. Same way Lord Chaitanya. And of course, he wasn't just leaving his elderly mother and his young wife, which is so heartbreaking for us. He was leaving all of the residents of Navadvip who loved him so much. And then we can see the mercy of Lord Nityananda in action because he tricked Lord Chaitanya to come back to Shantipur to see his mother Sachi and to again see all the devotees of Navadvip. And at that time, Sachi, his mother, said, "No, Vrindavan is too far away. I'll never hear from you. Don't disappear like your older brother disappeared when he took sannyas." So by her request, which I should have mentioned, that's another important direction from a woman to Lord Chaitanya. She said, "Make your headquarters at Puri, and then I can get word of you from time to time." So that's very, very important. So we can understand the mercy of Lord Nityananda in this story also. So thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for reading the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya. And also, you know, you brought up another thing for me by saying that we had a Bhakti Center call, maybe at this point a month or two ago. And one lady asked Radhanath Swami a very deep question, and he answered her in a very deep way. She said, "What happens? How should we deal with people misunderstanding us? It's so painful when people misunderstand us in this world." And Radhanath Swami answered in such a deep way that to me harkens back to this point about the underbelly of suffering is grace. He spoke from his own life and he said, "You know, I've also been in that situation in my life many times when people have misunderstood me and I've suffered because of their misunderstanding." But he said, I'm just paraphrasing as best I can remember, but he said something like, "But if you're patient and receive that with patience, then what happens is grace comes to you. From their misunderstanding, from being misunderstood, you're able to, in a deeper way, access some grace through that suffering." So we can think, oh, you know, suffering and spiritual separation is one thing, but in the material world, wow, that's just plain suffering. But you know what? We also access grace through suffering in this world. Sometimes we hear someone say that cancer was the best thing that ever happened to me, or something like that. You know, we had a god brother who recently passed away, Karnamrita Prabhu, and he was always telling his wife that he felt like complacency was his problem in Krishna consciousness. But then when he got cancer, he said to his wife, she told this at his memorial service a couple weeks ago. He said, "You know, cancer is the answer." And then he said, "Cancer is the embrace of Krishna," which is so amazing. So it's not just spiritual longing and separation that gives us grace, but even in this world. And that's maybe why Krishna puts suffering in this world. I like to quote C.S. Lewis, the great Christian theologian, who said that pain is God's megaphone to rouse a deaf world. We're so deaf, and we go through the world like zombies on automatic pilot all the time. But maybe when we get those, what Prabhupada calls pinpricks of suffering, then we come to a deeper place. Maybe we've all experienced that. Maybe you've experienced that, Lavanya, also. Because you're a very deep person. I know you're a very deep person. So thank you. Are there more thoughts or questions or feedback or takeaways?
I'm gonna do two things. I'm gonna actually, because we've got about 17 more minutes left and people are either being shy or something, although we're not such a shy group. I'm gonna allow people to unmute themselves, but then just so they can speak if they want to. The other thing I was thinking is, there's something they say that absence makes the heart grow fonder. And there's something in this separation that there's like an intensity of feeling in separation that is different from the feeling when you're present with someone. Like you can be present with someone and reading a book and whatever, and not really being aware even that you're present with them. And then they're just not there and you really are longing for them, that they're like, it's like all you can think of kind of thing. It's kind of a sort of interesting. And then when you're with them, it's like it sort of, sort of fades away a little bit.
It's so true. And one bhakti teacher actually said that, just as you're saying that within union, there's the anticipation of separation that, oh, she's here, he's here, but he could leave at any moment, right? But within separation, there's the anticipation of meeting. So separation is considered greater. Separation is on the path of bhakti is always considered a higher ecstasy than the love in union. So thank you.
Andrea put a link in here. You may or may not be able to see it, Rukmini, to the Chaitanya Chandamrita.
Chandramrita, oh, nectar. This is an amazing book. If any of you want to click on that link, it's such an amazing book. It's sort of like a mad ecstasy. If we have more time, I wonder if I could read some other verses. Oh, here's the cover. Here's the cover of the one I have. And, it's like a madness. He says things like, it's almost like he's committing offenses almost. He says, how was the world really benefited when Krishna appeared as a fish? How was the world really benefited when he appeared as a tortoise? But when he appeared as Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu, we can all get and understand the highest love of Krishna, things like that, and so many ecstatic verses like that. So I highly recommend that wonderful book. I could read a few verses if you wanted, but let's see if there's any other.
Does anyone else have a comment? Maybe you can raise your hand, we can call on you, or a comment or a question or anything else you'd like to just contribute today?
Sadhana has a raised hand.
Yes, okay, Sadhana, go for it.
Yes. Hare Krishna, everyone. My obeisances, Rukmini Prabhu. Thank you for doing this wonderful talk again.
I wish I could see your face. You have a phone number, but not a face.
Oh, sure, I will go on.
I know you're a tech person, so you know how to do
it. Yeah, I'm. I was just listening in. I have heard the story of how Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came, but the way you told it today from the story with Radharani and that dialogue between them has pretty much touched my heart. And, thank you so much. I mean, I've always wondered like the link in a very profound way, more than and then describing how the Shakis can be also of this other gender as friends. And so this really helps me in understanding the whole philosophy, and our practices much more. So thank you. And I just like, my profound thought was that, this Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came with that golden complexion and then he brought that bhava, that Radharani set the energy going, right?
Yeah.
And and then we see that energetic part of that as everything that Mahaprabhu touches. It touches everything, right? So much compassion and love. So it's such a great way to live. I also like the connection to suffering because just a little bit of a story, sorry, but
don't apologize. We want to.
I'm kind of not very emotional, but I have been recently because my daughter's been in Myanmar, and you know what's going on there. It's been pretty cruel, and every day you read very horrifying stories. And today I read that they basically went into a charity shop and took, they don't want people. There's a lot of charity shops set up by a lot of Westerners, foreigners, to give clothing back to the people who haven't got jobs or out of prison or are doing a movement. But they went and burnt that down, and this lady jumped off the balcony, and then they burnt the NGO office. So I've been for the last 2 weeks thinking about suffering, not for myself. Of course, I'm feeling the pain, but how that whole thing fits in. And so it's been nice to hear that we always go back to love and compassion, and that this world is a learning place, if you like. It's a growing place and learning place. So just sending prayers to those who are suffering every day. And so thank you. I mean, I like that whole idea of bhava, the energetic, and I can send my energy. I mean, it sounds a bit new age, but I feel like that's connecting me deeply. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for such a deep meditation. And let's all really send our prayers for your daughter and all the other people who are suffering in Myanmar right now. And this is important. As women, we are the energetic of the world, right? So we should never underestimate the power of prayer and have those powerful intentions going to all the places of suffering and all the people we see suffering, the ones we don't know. We can send out those prayers. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Miss you.
I miss you too. Another next time we visit. Yep.
Yeah, wonderful. Such wonderful, deep women. I'm so grateful to all of you. Sarah, you're smiling. What do you have to say? Susan's smiling too, but
nothing. I'm just enjoying hearing everybody right now.
What a wonderful coterie of beautiful Devi. So thank you so much. This is a great blessing. Actually, one thing I'll say is I've been putting in calls. I had such a wonderful time last month with my old friend Manjuwali that I haven't seen in so many years. She lives in the UK. Her son and my son used to be in the bathtub together when we were living in Los Angeles. And so I've been reaching out to other friends from around the world to join us and lead us in this Urban Devi Sanga in the coming months. So some of them have agreed. My dear friend Mandakini, who was Prabhupada sent her to Russia by herself, and she planted seeds of bhakti in Russia. So she's extraordinary. And so she'll be speaking with us and some other wonderful friends. So there are some questions in the chat, though, huh? There's something in the chat.
There is someone asking about Saradia wants to ask a question, and I will add the WhatsApp group link as soon as I can get to it. Okay. So Saradia, go ahead with your question.
Hare Krishna, dear Mother Rukmini. Thank you so much for the very beautiful katha. I was struggling to get in because I didn't have the right link, but I could catch the last part, and I will listen to the rest on YouTube once the recording is up. So I had a question about what you mentioned, how Lord Caitanya, in some ways, he challenged social norms, like he made Haridas Thakur the Namacharya, and he embraced Haridas Thakur's dead body, which I suppose was completely against the cultural customs at that point in time. But then when Haridas Thakur, and I think it was Rupantanata Goswami, when they didn't want to go into Jagannath temple because they considered themselves, I think, maybe contaminated or just not socially qualified, then he didn't he didn't protest that. He just kind of accepted that that was their, I suppose, their preference or their mood. So, we find ourselves in, I think, a position where we often also wonder, like, do we need to change social norms, or, do we need to respect people's preferences? So how do we know, what is the right path of action? Because I'm thinking there's, things within ISKCON and with, outside of ISKCON, but whatever is outside of ISKCON is going to be, affecting us in a matter of, it's just a matter of time. So how do we deal with this? Because I think it's going to become an increasing challenge, to know what should be challenged and what should be just, respected as the social norms.
Thank you. Thank you for such a deep question. So the question is really about discernment. And that's something that we all have to strive for and pray for. First of all, I would say that it wasn't their preference, but that was the rigid society at that time. So I think my answer would be for each of us to within ourselves pray for that discernment, to be able to discriminate when is the right time to speak up and when is the time. That's in the Bible, in Ecclesiastes, right? A time to reap, a time to sow, a time to mourn, a time to dance, a time to, I'm just paraphrasing again. But so that's discernment, right? And I think what I would also say is that each one of us needs to be an example of honoring unity and diversity, to live that, to be an example of tolerance, to be an example. I live and I teach by my actions, by my life. I teach and honor unity and diversity. I teach and live tolerance, not just tolerance, but embracing with love. So yeah, we need to exemplify that. We need to see how to live it in our own lives, and when to speak up and when to be silent. It is so interesting, isn't it? When I was, putting this presentation together, I was thinking, yeah, in some ways, Lord Caitanya turned it on its head. And in some ways, he just backed off and said, all right, let them be. There's another story I didn't mention that's really interesting. Do I have another? I have a couple minutes. Another story that's mentioned in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that's a wild one. There was a devotee named Subhuti Rai, and he had committed some little offense to the Muslim magistrate, the Nawab. And for that, the Nawab decided he was going to turn him into Subhuti Rai was a very devout Hindu, right? Or Krishna conscious person, we would say. And so this Muslim magistrate decided he was going to turn him into a Muslim by sprinkling water on him. So at that time, just imagine how wild, that society was so rigid that if a Muslim person would just sprinkle water on a Hindu, they would be considered an outcast. They would be banned from Hindu society and condemned, and now you're an outcast. Isn't that, to me, it's crazy. It's wild. But that was the society at that time. So this Muslim Nawab sprinkled water on him like that. So then he was so bewildered, he didn't know what to do. So he went and he asked these caste Brahmins, these kind of, when we use the word caste Brahmin, it means born in a Brahmin family. So someone may be Brahmin by quality. In Bhagavad Gita, it talks about being Brahmin by quality and by work, not by birth, but traditionally by birth, right? So he went and asked these guys, what should I do? And they said, well, what you should do is you should commit suicide by drinking boiling hot ghee. Can you imagine? They told him that. These are the teachers, right? And so then he went and asked Lord Caitanya what he should do. And Lord Caitanya said, chant the holy name and take shelter of Sri Vrindavan Dham. That's what Lord Caitanya said. So, we can choose. Do we want material bhava, full of rules and rituals and external trappings? Or do we want the essence? We have to be, and that's another point about this discernment. We have to become essence seekers. if we want the essence of the path of bhakti, we have to be able to get out of the weeds of all this kind of stuff that comes at us all the time about this, that, and the other thing, and craziness, you know. Women can't do this, women can't do that, you have to do this, you have to do that, whatever it is, all that kind of external stuff, right? So go to the essence, be an example of unity and diversity. Let your beautiful qualities shine, and then you'll be an example. I love that quote from St. Francis. I try to preach all day, and if necessary, I use a few words.
Mm.
So live an example. You know, each one of you is a teacher. Each one of you is a leader in some way or another. You know, and let your good qualities shine. Let that essence of bhakti shine through your heart. Someone has a question.
Yeah, Saradia has a follow-up question. We have just a couple minutes left, so.
Okay.
Go ahead,
Hare
Sara.
Krishna, Mata. Thank you so much for the answer. I'll try and keep it brief. So my question is, like, you know, within ISKCON, I think we see like there seems to be a growing trend of, you know, polarization. And on the one hand, you know, we've got the devotees that I would say might be a bit more progressive and open in their thinking, and they would always, you know, kind of present the view that you've just presented, like, you know, be open, be tolerant, be accommodating, etc. But that in itself, like taking that stance in itself, you know, is a kind of characteristic of those that are more, you know, towards the progressive. But, you know, in any like sphere, if we look at the people that take the more conservative stance, they also usually think that there's only one right way. So how do we deal with that? Like for myself, I feel like, you know, I can accommodate people with, you know, different moods and, you know, different understanding and different ways of expressing their bhakti. I don't mind. But then how do we deal with the people that, you know, are very forcefully saying like, no, there is only one way?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
also wanting that to, you know, to be enforced on others. How do we deal with them?
Isn't it so true that in all times, in all places, there are always people like that? I have so many things I could say. I heard, let's see, not Manjuwali, but Mandakini was saying that she heard Radhanath Swami say that, he said, I tend to be quite liberal, but I'm helped by people who have more conservative views because it helps me be a balanced person. So that's a very interesting view. And it's true, some people are intolerant, but those people will always be there in the world. And sometimes being a sane person, being a balanced person means let's just agree to disagree, and let's do that agreeably. Can we agree to disagree agreeably? Because, you know, some people who don't want to change their you know, their way of thinking are not going to be changed by you being open-minded or by anything I would say. Or so you know, sometimes we just have to fold our hands and say, I honor our differences. You're a sacred, beloved soul, just like I am. Each one of us is sacred and beloved to Krishna. So I honor you and I honor our differences. And let's agree to disagree agreeably. And someone may take that up and someone may not. And then if they don't, you just have to go, Hari Bol. But we can't be swayed from having our vision on the pole star of Krishna's lotus feet by people like that. You know, someone may object, your mother may object, your brother may object, your kids may object, but you know, this life is temporary and it's meant for putting our treasures at the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, putting the treasures of our hearts at the lotus feet of Lord Krishna in whatever ways we can, you know. And different people will do that in different ways. So, you know, honoring the differences, I think, is very important because people, you know, we may be enriched by someone else's understanding that's very different from our own. And sometimes we may just have to, you know, fold our hands and say, I honor you in all the ways you're different from me. Is that helpful?
She said,
Hare Krishna, that was very helpful. Thank you so much. I hope I can join your Sangas again in the future and learn more from all the wonderful Vaishnavis.
You're always welcome. It's so nice to have you. Thank you so much. Make sure all of you are in the WhatsApp group, because then you'll get notified. Oh, Brajarani's about to tell us the next date, right, Brajarani?
Yes, I've actually posted all of this. So the WhatsApp group, you can see, I think most of you are in it, and that's how you heard about this change in link. So, so find it above and click on that, and that will put you into the group. The next Sangha is April 26th, and it's Sarva Mangala.
25th.
Devi.
25th.
25th, what I write? 25th, yes. Sarva Mangala Devi Das.
And she is such a live wire. You guys will love her. She's British, and she's got a very dry British sense of humor. Right now, she's living in Australia with her Australian husband, but she is fantastic. So don't miss Sarva Mangala. I won't. I love her.
Yes. And the time is actually 2 p.m. Eastern. And I see a request for a different time, because I know that's late in some parts of the world. But it's 2 p.m. Eastern is the current time for our sanghas. So again, the next one is April 25th, and you have the WhatsApp link above. We're at 3:34. As you can see, this has been recorded. As soon as the recording is ready, it will be posted also into the group. So if you missed part of today, you'll be able to hear the whole thing. And it goes from 2 to 3:30 Eastern time once a month, usually on the fourth Sunday, but sometimes differently. So keep track there. So Hare Krishna, everyone. Thank you all so much.
Thank you for joining.
Unmute and say a Hari Bol to Rukmini. I'm sure she would love
Hari
to hear all your
Hari
voices.
Bol.
Thank you all so much.
Hari Bol.
Thank you all so much. Thank you for joining. Good to see all of you. Sarah and Pat and Susan and Lavanga and Sadhana and the Pink Yogi and Saradia, Lajavati and Lajashila, Paula, Gail, Andrea. Let me see who else is here. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you.
Hari Bol. See you all next month.
Haribol.
Hopefully with these glitches.
Sorry about the glitches today. It was our fault.
Completely. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.